The one thing that I'll tell you is I had a bit of like a progression over the years through that. So at first, I was very aggressively looking to cut out anybody and everybody who wasn't really helping me with my goals, wasn't aligned with my goals, wasn't fueling me and my purpose, and just was more negative, was pulling me back. If anything, my solution was really to cut people out. I just approached it cold, just nothing considered, right? And this is an evolution I've had as I've matured. I've grown older, just matured generally in business and whatnot. I went from black and white. It's either 100% or 0%. It's black or white. There is no in between, period. That was my mindset with anything and everything, really. To now, most things are in the gray areas of life. I just realized that most things are really in the gray areas, and it's particular, it's situational. You have to really see. So I went from a mindset of pretty much cutting out everybody to then realizing that I don't necessarily need to do that. I have good friends of mine who are, on different paths, and we've been friends since childhood. I love those people. They love me, and it's great. We see each other here and there. I don't need to cut them out. It doesn't need to be that extreme. What I realized is I just need to set the boundaries. So there's a couple things you can do in terms of setting boundaries. One is having the conversation. And I've done this with family members, my parents. I've done this with friends. I've done this with even like coworkers, different jobs that I've worked where people were like, you're too hardcore, you're too like strict, you're too, disciplined. Really, I've had this like from coworkers at work. And I've had to be like, all right, man, let's set some boundaries here. We work together. I don't want to hear this from you. I just don't want to hear from you, period, when it comes to this area, because I don't want your results. I don't want your life. So I wouldn't trade places with you. So I don't want to hear from you, period. Let's just keep the conversations casual and day to day, right? So there's one thing to do in terms of setting boundaries is having the conversation. You got to have the hard conversations. You got to confront those people, confront those situations, and do it from a good place. Do it from a place of, you genuinely wanting better for yourself and more for yourself, and genuinely just telling them, like, listen, this area here, I don't want to discuss with you. And I would really appreciate it if I didn't hear that from you again. And I'm really not looking for advice in this particular area. Thank you very much. I love our relationship. I want to keep our friendship the same, but I don't want to be having these discussions. I appreciate you. I hope we're on the same page. Great. Let's move on, right? So that's one way of setting boundaries. Another way is you set boundaries physically, right? You may see somebody less often. You may, only spend time with them when necessary, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're spending a lot of time with somebody, whether you like it or not, you start to become like them. You start to think the same. You start to talk the same. You start to act the same, right? The one thing that I would tell you when it comes to people, especially, is you just want to set the boundaries. You don't necessarily have to cut people cold turkey, but you have to set boundaries. There's one guy, his name is Holton Buggs. He was in the network marketing space. He was like, back in the day, he worked for a company, I think it was Oregano Gold, but it was coffee. It was a coffee company. And this guy was like, he built a huge network of people, huge business, and he was doing great. And when I was probably like 16, 17 years old, I used to watch his live talks when he was on stage because he was extremely inspirational. There was a lot to learn from him. And he's the guy I got the line from: observe the masses, do the opposite. And that stuck with me ever since. Observe the masses, do the opposite. That ideology has pretty much served me in every part of my life. Highly recommend it. So Holton Buggs used to talk about this concept of cutting out people. And he literally used to talk about his mom as an example. And he used to say, what I did with my mom is I gave her a time frame. So he said, I don't want to cut my mom off. Obviously, it's family and whatnot. But when she would call me, I would say, all right, mom, you have 10 minutes for this week. Go ahead. And he would have the conversation, blah, 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 have the conversation. And then 10 minutes is up. It's like, listen, mom, I love you a lot. I got to get back to business. I got to get back to work. Talk to you next week. Boom, hang up. Right. So that was his way of setting boundaries. Now, again, I'm not saying do that particular to you, your family, your situation, whatever, right? That's an example of setting boundaries, having standards in place, right? I think once you set clear boundaries and you have conviction in your boundaries, other people will respect that. Even if it's family, even if it's friends, they'll respect that. Sooner than or later, they'll realize, okay, this person really doesn't want their boundaries crossed. Because then the next step is to cut that person out. If they continuously, maliciously are crossing these boundaries and looking to harm your success or slow you down or whatever it is, then of course you have to cut that person out, because life is just too short. It's not worth it, right? You can't have these type of people in your environment, in your circle, in your surroundings. It's just not positive. So eventually that's the last resort. And I've done that as well with many people. But first and foremost, you set boundaries. And this is why, back to consistency. I said people are always looking at you to see if you're serious, to see if you're real, to see if you mean what you say. That's why if you start a brand and go on social media and talk for a couple of days and then you're off of it, and if you try to say like, listen, I have boundaries with my business, people are going to say, and rightly so, they're going to say, what business? You've been on there for 2 days. What are you talking about? You're saying I'm negative. How about you get your own disciplines in check? How about you actually get serious about your own business? right? And they have the right to do so because that's your fault. That's on you. But if you make commitments to yourself, and this is how you build confidence. You build confidence by keeping the promises you make to yourself. So if you make commitments to yourself, then you keep those promises. You're building your own confidence and conviction. And now you are actually on your path. Then you can set real boundaries and look somebody in the eyes and say, listen, I'm not playing here with this area. I need my boundaries. I don't want to hear from you with this area. I have my mentors that I learned from. I have this, I have that. So with you, I want to keep our relationship the way it is. I don't want to talk business here. Thank you. I would appreciate that. Then they realize, okay, this person means business. It's coming from a real place. So again, it all starts with you as well.